Okay, welcome everybody to the Statistics Solutions Chapter 2 webinar. Just a couple of things before we get started. We do have a support person on with us who can answer your non-content related questions. Also, you are welcome to type questions into the question and answer box or the chat box, but the content related questions I won't answer until the end, but you're welcome to pose them as we proceed. And as far as copies of the presentation, everybody will get a copy. Okay. Everybody can hear me, I'm assuming. Okay. All right, let's get started. Okay. So this is a general kind of overview and, covering the features and what to expect in Chapter 2, which is typically the literature review for the, standard 5-chapter social sciences dissertation. These are the contents we're going to be covering. And you're going to get tired of me saying this, but the place to start is to get the template from your school, obviously for the entire dissertation, but if you have questions specifically about the lit review or Chapter 2, get the template from your school, because while there are common features and common sections among among schools that are common in general, sometimes schools require specific things. The sections might be in a different order. They might have different titles. So always go by the specific template from your school. If they don't have a template, this will act as a general template, or you can ask your chair. You're well within your rights to ask your chair for an example of a study they'd like you to follow, like maybe, something that they've chaired before and got approved. And examples are always helpful of dissertations in your area from your school, because it's easier to see what people have done. You can go to webinars, you can read articles, study resources about what to do, but when you sit down to write, sometimes it's still challenging, and it's easier if you can actually see, the work that somebody has done that's gone before you. So examples are a good idea, as well as having your school's guidelines or your school's template. Okay, these are the sections, and we'll go through and talk about each one. Okay, so the introduction for the chapter, it's just like the introduction for any other chapter. What it's going to do is it's going to set up what you're going to talk about. So really in the introduction, you just need to remind the reader of the importance of your study, remind the reader why it's needed, restate the purpose. Is a good place to start. And you can preview contents of the chapter. In other words, let the reader know what to expect, what's going to come in the chapter. So the introduction is, it's not a big deal. Again, it's just to reorient the reader. A paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs. It doesn't need to be that long. There's typically something called a literature search strategy. Sometimes the title may be different, but it's the same idea. And what the reader and what your professors are looking for is, how did you conduct the search for the research that you're reviewing? And the idea is that you want to be comprehensive. You can't be exhaustive. Like you can't find everything out there. That would be exhaustive. But they want they want to know that you've done a comprehensive search, right? Like a wide search, depth and breadth. And so when you describe it, that helps show them what you did, how you searched, and that includes starting something like searching, for this literature review, I conducted a comprehensive search using the, whatever your library's name is, usually your online library portal that gets you into the university's library databases. List the databases that you searched, and search tools. Sometimes it's not just straight up databases. It's like Academic Search Complete or Academic Search Premier. Those are search tools. They search, wide several databases at once. Google Scholar, or any kind of specific, database that's specific to your area of study. So list the databases, search tools. If sometimes you have to go to special, they want you to go to target specialized journals, any specialized journals that you may have searched. Then you want to talk a little bit about the terms that you used to search. And this isn't going to be any surprise, right? It's going to be your variables, the factors you're studying, any major concepts. And usually they just want you to list the terms and just say that you search these terms and various combinations of the terms. And any kind of way that you qualified or modified your search, there's some important ways that you can do that, and you should mention that. So, if you stuck with English only articles, fine, you can say that. That's not a real important one. Usually, we're writing in English, so it's usually typical. Full text, again, not so important, but date of publication would be important, because some schools want you to only use research that has been published in the past 5 years. Some schools want you to only use research published in the past 3 or 4 years. So if those are the cases, some schools don't care. Some schools, they don't have a kind of parameters on the publication dates. But if they do, like they want you to use material from the past 5 years, it's important to include that in your search criteria, like you focused only on those publications from those dates. And also peer reviewed. This is an important one that everybody should include. They want the bulk of your material and the lit review to be peer reviewed. How do you know if something's peer reviewed? There are ways. I think there's something called Ulrichs, ULRICH. It's a kind of database that tells you that whether certain articles are peer reviewed or whether certain journals are peer reviewed that your article came from. But usually you don't even have to go that far. If you click on, all these search tools have an option where you can click on only return peer reviewed sources. So it'll sort them out for you. So what you're going to get, if you click on that, you're only going to get peer reviewed sources. So you really don't even have to kind of, confirm it usually. Okay. And usually you can tell anything from an academic journal it's almost certainly peer reviewed. Okay. So that means they don't want you to use books, websites. You can use websites sparingly, but usually if it's a government website or something for statistics, books, again, sparingly. Sometimes for theories, you can use books, but they want the bulk of the material to be from peer-reviewed academic journals. Okay. And again, this section is not a long section, maybe a paragraph, maybe a couple paragraphs. So not too long. Okay, for most schools, not all schools, again, follow your specific template and your guidelines. There'll be a section on the theoretical framework in chapter 2. Some schools have it only in chapter 1 and not in chapter 2. Some schools have it only in chapter 2 and not in chapter 1. But most schools have a mention of the theoretical framework in chapter 1, and then you talk a little bit more about it in chapter 2. So if this is the case, there's going to be some kind of overlap. I wouldn't copy and paste anything from chapter 1 directly into the chapter 2. But you can use some of the materials if you just kind of change it up a little bit. So it's going to be kind of basically what you did in chapter 1 with a little bit more explanation and a little more extended discussion. So the important parts are, who developed the theory. Obviously, I have a source for it that includes a year. What did they develop the theory for? Define the theory. It's real important to do that. Sometimes people, start talking about things and they haven't stopped to define the theory. If there's any important components to your theory, define those. Okay. Discuss a little bit about what other researchers have used the theory for, and connect it to your study. Like how is it going to help you explain what you're studying? And sometimes you may need to bring in a couple articles, studies that have used the theory recently. That helps to show your readers and your professors that it's still a valid theory, that people are still using it, it's still current. We're going to have a discussion, a little bit of, because I know there's going to be a question, what's the difference between a theoretical framework and a conceptual framework? There's whole articles on this, and you're welcome to go seek those out. But generally, it seems that theoretical frameworks are more associated with quantitative studies, and conceptual frameworks are more associated with qualitative studies. And the short answer for the reason for that is, for quantitative studies, you're using some kind of survey instrument, right, or questionnaire, and those things, and the questionnaires and the instruments, they always have a theoretical base. So if you're using a questionnaire or instrument to measure emotional intelligence, there's a theoretical base for that. And you always want your theory to match what it is you're studying based on your instrument. And you want, not only that, you want your whoever theorist, however you're defining your construct. Let's just stick with emotional intelligence. There's going to be several instruments for measuring emotional intelligence, right? There's going to be Goldman's, and I don't know the other theorists, but there's several instruments. So if you're using Goldman's instrument to measure emotional intelligence, you want to use Goldman's definition of emotional intelligence. All right. So in other words, if you're using Goldman's instrument, you don't want to use Smith's definition, because there will be differences, right? That's why there are different instruments. They focus on a little bit different things. They conceptualize things differently. So the short story to that is, make sure whatever whoever researchers instrument you're using, make sure you're using also their theoretical definition of the construct and the theory. Conceptual frameworks for qualitative. Usually there's not an overarching theory for what you're studying in a qualitative study, because sometimes they're exploratory. You're not sure what's out there. You're seeing what you're going to get. So sometimes it's more appropriate to kind of pull a couple concepts together, major concepts about what you're studying, and put them together to create a framework, so you don't have really an overarching theory. Okay, so that's the theoretical framework. Again, really close to what you've done in chapter 1, with a little more explanation, a little more discussion, and maybe bringing in some recent studies that have used the theory to show that it's still being used. Okay, and then the review of the literature section. This is the meat, and this is the heart of the literature review. This is going to be like 80-90% of the chapter. And this is where you're basically reviewing. And when they say review, they mean you're synthesizing ideas and you're doing a little bit of analysis. So it's not pure summary, it's some summary, but you're also going to be making comments on the quality of the research, on your topic, on your factors, on your variables. And these aren't general discussions. The research needs to be really focused on what you're doing. And again, stick with, if your school wants stuff published mainly within the past 5 years, make sure you stick with that, because I see that all the time. People's their sources are out of date. They're using stuff from 10, 12, 15 years ago, and the template says use things from the past 5 years. So that's going to be something that your professors will immediately jump on. So first of all, make sure that you're sticking within the parameters of the publication dates. So how do you organize this section? You're going to have to subsection it out. It's going to have subsections, which does a couple of things. It's easier for you as a writer to focus on a section and then move on to another section. And it's also easier for readers to digest information that way, instead of having just one big long chunk of text. And focus it on your factors, right? If you're studying emotional intelligence and something else, some other kind of, like, let's say, transformational leadership, I mean, those are going to be your two major headers right there. You might, so for emotional intelligence, you might have an introductory paragraph, defining emotional intelligence. Again, not a general definition, but how you're using it in your study. A definition of emotional intelligence, maybe an opening paragraph, a little bit of background. But again, the lit review is not really about background, so you don't need a lot of that. But you want to get pretty quickly to the major current research on emotional intelligence, and as closely related to your topic as possible. And within that section on emotional intelligence, there may be subsections, and that is kind of dependent on what is actually in the research. So there may be trends, right? Trends that have emerged. So you have to kind of look at, the research on EI that you've pulled, and see what some of the trends are, see what things people seem to be focusing on. And those will help you kind of determine some of the subtopics or subsections within the overall emotional intelligence section. And again, you always want to keep a focus on how things connect to your study, because what you're doing with the review of the literature, the big picture for it is you're showing what people have done, the research people have done on your topic, to show, and by showing what people have done, you're also showing what they haven't done, where you're showing the gaps, right? And then, so what the lit review becomes is a big argument for why you should conduct your study. Okay, here's what people have done on EI and transformational leadership. But you also, and the whole time you're kind of highlighting what hasn't been done, or weaknesses, or gaps. And again, that sets up the need for your study. Okay, let's get a little deeper into how to organize material. What kind of material from the studies do they want? So we mentioned synthesis here. Reviewing research consists of synthesis and analysis. So it's more than just summary, right? Synthesis means combining things together, synthesizing them, combining them together to create a whole. So at the paragraph, just think of your old, go back to, how to create a good paragraph. You have a topic sentence, right? So your topic of a paragraph might be some point, that comes up in the literature related to what you're studying. Have a topic sentence, evidence or discussion or illustration, several sentences on that. And then a summary, or a concluding sentence, sometimes transitioning to the next paragraph. So let's see what that looks like at the paragraph level. Okay, and I bring this up at the paragraph level because sometimes people get confused about how do I put all this stuff together? What does it mean to synthesize? So in synthesis, so what you're doing for these studies, you're summarizing kind of what the person did. What was the purpose of the study? What kind of things did they focus on? What were the variables? What kind of study was it? Was it qualitative, quantitative? What was the design? What did they find? The findings are important, but you also, so you want part of its summary, but you also want to take that information and see how it relates to other studies. Like, does what this person found relate, is the same as what these other researchers found? If so, you make the connection. If it's different, then say that. So you want to note similarities and differences, kind of comparing, contrasting between the studies and what they find in relation to what you're doing. And analysis is part of it. So you can make, judgments about the quality of the research. Sometimes there's limitations to the research. Well, this was a great study, but they focused on a really narrow area, a really narrow population, and it doesn't get at all the, it doesn't get it all the different kind of diverse, populations there might be, or they had this was a good study, but they had a really small sample size, and that really, affected the results. So anything like that, any kind of limitations you want to note about the studies. Right, analysis, noting shortcomings, gaps, also note trends, what researchers seem to be focusing on. And also, again, reiterate and keep in mind that the focus should always be how things connect to your study and your research problems. So how these research may have been done in this area, but it's still something lacking, and hence that's why your study is needed. So again, the lit review really culminates in an argument for the need for your study. Okay, and I know that's kind of quick for a big chunk, but that's the general idea of the review of the literature. And again, stick with your template, get examples to help you, but you're really following your, as far as headers, the major concepts, your variables. Again, remember, it's not a general discussion of the topic. It's a review of the literature related specifically to what you're doing. Okay, so when you get to the summary, recap major, again, it's like a typical summary. Recap major points from the chapter, remind the reader of the research problem based on, what you just reviewed, what's in the literature and what's not in the literature. Reiterate the need for your study, and that, a summary for chapter 2, a couple paragraphs maybe. And don't write the fake summary, what I call like fake summaries. It's like sometimes people kind of, I don't know why they sometimes they just kind of get lazy on the summary, and they say, well, I did this, and I did this. And I was like, well, that's not a summary. That's just a list of what you did. So a summary is, like it says, recap the major points of the chapter. Thought I had another point here. Like page length, because I know somebody's going to ask me about page length. Again, some schools have specific page lengths. Some schools don't care, or they do care, but they don't tell you until, afterwards your chair will say, well, this is only 10 pages. But go to your template, see what your template says. I've seen lit reviews that are 10 pages. I've seen lit reviews that are 80 pages. Usually it's based on what's out there, but it seems like the sweet spot is about 30 pages, 25 to 30 pages, if that helps you out. Okay. And that is our information, who we are, and our contact information. If you want to talk to somebody, it's a free consult. about what we offer. And if you think you might want help with it, just, get in touch with us. And I'll keep that up. And again, everybody's going to get a copy. And I'll answer your questions now. Let me move to the questions and see what we have. Okay, let's see. Right, I missed hearing the first chapter. Is it possible to receive that? I missed hearing the first chapter. Is it possible to receive that recording? We did do the first chapter. Let me see. Okay. What if you were doing an inductive, descriptive, qualitative design and do not have a theoretical framework? Okay, I'm not quite sure of the question. Like, do you need a framework? If you need a framework, then you need a framework. If your school or your chair is not requiring one, you don't need one. But you should. I mean, I don't really see studies without frameworks, whether they're theoretical or conceptual. So my guess is you would probably need, if it's qualitative, you probably need a conceptual framework. Just double check with your template and your guidelines and your chair. I mean, your chair is your go-to person, right? If you have specific questions, I mean, and don't hesitate to ask your chair things. I know some people, and I get it. Sometimes people can get intimidated by their chairs for whatever reason. There's personality differences, or sometimes, chairs are just intimidating, or they seem that way. But anything that's, reasonably related to your study, I mean, that's what they're there for. You're well within your rights to ask them specific questions. Okay, let's see. Do you have strategies for organizing notes and information from articles before writing? Yes, that's a good question. Sometimes people like to take out the important, like go through the studies and take out the important information first and put it in like, organize it somehow, just put it in another document. And then so that way, when they sit down to draft, they have the important information from the studies at hand. They don't have to kind of go back to each study. And so that then raises the question, what is the important information? That would be things like the purpose of the study. Why did they conduct the study? What were they trying to find out? The variables or the factors that were studied, those are important. The type of study, was it qualitative, was it quantitative? The study design is important. Sometimes the population or the setting are important, but it's something to pull out in case you need it. And obviously the most important thing are the findings, right? What did they find? Other things that might be important might be if they make specific recommendations that relates to your study somehow, those recommendations would be important. If there's some kind of limitations that are important to your study somehow, like, one of the limitations is they didn't focus on what you focused on. They conducted a really similar study, but there was a different focus or a different population. Anything like that would be important. So those are the big things. So when you're looking, some people do that, stage first. Just look at the studies, pull out the important information. So yeah, that's a good question. So you can do that. Okay, let's see. All right. Please show us an example of summary or conclusion section for the literature review. I don't have one handy. But again, the easiest thing to do is either to ask your chair or just go into ProQuest, ProQuest dissertations. Or your school might even have a place where they store dissertations after they've been approved. But ProQuest is the place that everybody's dissertation is published on when it's done. So you can go there and search dissertations from your school in a similar area as yours. Again, ask your chair. Sometimes your chair is happy to give you an approved dissertation as a sample. But that will, and you can see there'll be plenty of examples of summaries and conclusions for the review, but I don't have one I can show you. But it basically kind of follows, again, what I outlined. Let's see, right. Okay. Some old studies are pioneering studies, hence they should not be ignored. What is your take? Exactly. My take is exactly what you said. Anything that's foundational, or as you say, pioneering, yeah, you can include them. They should just, the focus should really be on current research, but anything that is foundational or really important, like, really similar germinal, yeah, you can include that. Yep, for sure. And when you're talking about the theories too, like in the theoretical framework, you can also use older references, because sometimes the theories move really slowly. So when you're referring to the theories, it's usually okay to use older references. It's really the review of the literature part where stuff should be, material should be recent. Okay, let me see, I got some other questions here. Is your topic sentence for each lit review paragraph supposed to be your own idea, or is it supported to be cited as someone else's idea, and then you put the other people in conversation with them into the paragraph? That's correct. It's there should be really very little of you in here, right? Because you're reviewing other people's studies. So it's something that comes, like, so the topic sentence is something that comes from the literature. It's a, it's a trend, or it's something that recurs, or that's important. So it is somebody else's idea. And then you're right, you put other people in conversation with one another in the paragraph. And sometimes summarizing, right? You're gonna have to do a little summary too, to talk about what Smith's study was about and how Smith approached it. But Smith found this, and Jones conducted another study, and Jones focused on these things and found something different, or maybe found something similar. So sometimes the findings confirm one another, sometimes they differ. But that's the general idea. Okay. Let's see, when you're reiterating major points of chapter 2, how do you not reiterate every major point made in the lit review? Are you just reviewing the headers in a different language than? Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you're not, well, so it's kind of a, it's a summary, right? So you don't have to kind of say everything about the point. Just so if, if there's been a major trend in the literature, or say, certain themes or certain kind of ideas emerge, you can just kind of recap that. You don't have to kind of explain it all over again. So it's kind of an overview, right? It's a summary. It's a brief kind of recap. You don't have to, go back into depth on it. Okay. And yeah, you can use your headers if you want to, as a kind of way to spur your memory of what was in those, and give a little description of like the major takeaway from the section. That's probably a better way to put it. So you don't, obviously can't, rewrite the section again. When you go back, let's see, when you go back to add in lit that has come out while you were finishing up your dissertation, how do you easily situate it into the review without having to go back and rewrite everything? Okay, that's a good question. The question is, if there is material research that has come out while you've been writing your dissertation, how do you bring in that new research and put it into your lit review? Here's the easy answer. Usually it's not required for the lit review. In other words, if something recent has come out while you were writing your dissertation, usually professors don't expect you to put it back in the literature review. Now, what they do expect is, and usually what I find most of the time, 90% of the time, nothing has come out. It seems odd, but I don't encounter that very often. But where it's more important is with chapter 5. So the connection between chapter 2 and chapter 5, if we pull back a little bit and we're looking at the big picture, part of what you do in chapter 5, once you get your results, is you talk about your results in relation to the findings of previous studies from chapter 2, some of the major findings of major studies in chapter 2. So, and you compare what you found. Does what you've found support or not support previous research? So if anything new has come out while you're writing your dissertation, you usually mention that in and include it in chapter 5. They don't, I've never seen anybody be required to then take that and put it back in chapter 2. So I wouldn't worry about that part, but they may ask you to do a little quick search to see if anything's come out and mention it in chapter 5. And if they did want you to put something in too, you wouldn't have to rewrite everything. You would just kind of insert it where it makes sense to insert it. If it's on a certain topic or a certain area, it may be, not too difficult to kind of insert it or put it at the end of a section or something. But it doesn't mean you have to rewrite everything. Okay, how can we be assured that our literature review search is extensive enough? Any advice for those conducting budding research? How is it? Yeah, how is it extensive enough? I mean, that's kind of what that paragraph is, the literature search strategy. They want to know you use the major search tools. Use the major databases for your area. Use Google Scholar. Google Scholar is one of these things that searches multiple databases, right? So that's going to give you a lot of width, a lot of search area right there. These tools that search multiple databases. So there's no way to really prove it. They just want to show that that you didn't I just used one database. Obviously you can't be comprehensive with one database. They just want to know that you've used some of the bigger search tools and some of the the databases that are specific to your area. I think like SAGE is a big social sciences one. ERIC is big for education. They want to know that you've used some of the biggies. And again, if something is kind of databases are specific to your area, that you've used those. And the search terms help with that too, right? If you're studying, a couple variables and they each have components, make sure you include in the search terms all the things that you're studying, right? You don't want to, if you leave things out there, like, well, why didn't you study, A and B, or search A and B. So the search terms help with that too, so you have kind of a list of things that are relevant to your study or possibly relevant. And that helps to assure people that that you've conducted a comprehensive search. But as far as like proof, what's enough? You just have to kind of make sure it seems that you've covered your bases. Would systematic review be applicable for business topic areas? Yeah, I don't see why not. Business studies are just a different kind of study. But yeah, I think for business studies, you need a lit review, and it really proceeds in similar fashion. Okay, different researchers have different and often conflicting takes on the best statistical procedures to use in some circumstances, correct? How do you best justify your choice when there's conflicting research to best post hoc for small samples with non-homogeneous variants, et cetera? Okay, once you start getting into methods, like hardcore methods, I'm not a methods person. So any methods, rationale, I'm not the person to answer those, but we do have webinars for methods. But kind of more generally, takes on best statistical procedures. I mean, I think that would be what's more suitable for what you're doing, right? And right, there are differences, and part of that is like any choice you make in a study, it needs to have a rationale, right? So nothing is going to be random. Nothing is going to be, I just picked this over this for, what the heck. Anything you choose is going to need a rationale. And sometimes it's not what's best. Sometimes it's what's more suited for what you're doing. So maybe, sometimes you need to approach it that way. But again, the actual statistical methodological components of this question, I can't answer. Okay, how do we determine the research method, quantitative, qualitative, or both? Yeah, that comes early, right? And it's based on what you're doing, right? What the research problem is, what the kind of information that you're looking to get. So if it's a topic where we really don't know much, right? It's really kind of not a new topic, but nobody's really explored it. That would lend itself to qualitative research, because it's, with qualitative research, you can be exploratory. You can ask people questions. Hey, what about this? So a lot of times it's determined based on the topic and based on, again, the information you want to find out. If you're just looking at, for example, if two constructs are related to one another, that's a simple quantitative correlational design. So it depends, right? If let's say if you wanted to get a comprehensive view of something, some kind of phenomenon, you might do a mixed methods, because it would give you, a quantitative component and a qualitative component, or a case study, and a case study might be mixed. Sometimes, it's like school studies, you study one or two schools and you have multiple data sources. That's a case study, but that lets you get different kinds of data, and it allows you to be more comprehensive if you don't need to be like laser focused. So it really depends, again, on the topic and the research problem and what kind of information you're trying to get. And of course, all that should be discussed, your chair, and I get it. And this is kind of part of why we exist, is some chairs are more helpful than others. I get it. But ideally, your chair should be working with you to help you answer some of these questions and help guide you. And I know sometimes they're not, but they should be. And if they don't, I don't have answers for that. But sometimes you can go to your second committee member. Sometimes there's workarounds, but all these ideas about what direction you should go in. And I know sometimes your chairs expect you to have these, it's like, why should I tell you? You should already know, what to do this. My advice is just to work with your chairs as best you can. Will we ever feel like we are confident in writing our dissertation, or is the feeling of despair and uncertainty going to be with? I'm not laughing at that. It's just the kind of the wording of the question. Until we defend and are called doctor, at what point do you begin to just go with the flow and stop worrying? Is that when you're done? That's good. That's kind of that's a perseverance question, right? Because it takes a lot. It's like having a job, right? I mean, it's and I know people have jobs and they have families, and here's a dissertation, and it's a lot to get into. It's confident in writing it. You're not going to feel confident while you're writing it. Let me just put it that way, usually. And here's why: because you haven't done it before, right? Just think of anything else that you haven't done before. You're feeling your way along. You're learning as you're doing it. And so the confidence and the sense of accomplishment is going to come at the end. So while you're doing it, you're going to be second guessing yourself. You're going to be unsure. And I like your phrasing here. You just have to kind of stop worrying about it. as far as the anxiety, and just go do the best you can based on what your chair is telling you, based on what the guidelines and the template is telling you, based on, obviously there's resources, there's us, there's other resources. So based on everything that you can marshal, you just have to go with it. And you're going to feel uncertain until the end. And it's kind of, fake it till you make it. And you will, and then once you get done, you will feel better, and you will feel more confident, because you will have achieved it. You will have done it, and that's called, a mastery experience. Once you master something, you're on the other side of it. So that's a great question as far as like the emotional component, the perseverance component. And yeah, you just have to do the best you can, and put your nose to the grindstone, and just do it. Okay. Is there a structure approach in performing analysis, especially several experts discuss on the same area? Performing analysis, I'm not sure if that's a methods question. I'm not going to be able to answer it. Again, I'm not a methods person. But again, we do offer methods and methods related webinars every week. So just check the schedule. If you're really, interested in having, the methods webinars and those questions answered. Any other questions? This was great. I like these questions, and especially the one about hanging in there. And because sometimes it is about hanging in there, right? It's a big hill to climb, and again, you've never done it, so you're not going to feel comfortable. But you do your best, and you get everything at your disposal that can help you, and you knock it out. And another thing is, it's like going to the gym. You want results, don't like, I can't go today. I can't go today. I'm a little tired. I can't go today. Same thing with a dissertation. You got to set work. You got to set a work schedule, and try to keep it. Okay. Any other questions? I'm going to let everybody go, but if there's the last question, I'm happy to answer it. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Good luck. Again, we offer these weekly on different topics, different chapters. Good luck. And if you think you need help, reach out to us and see what we offer. Great. Thank you. All right. Goodbye.